and welcome to episode number 92 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And oh man, what a rough week. What a wasted opportunity for both of us this week was. Coming into week 19, Erik had just come off of a loss to Yuki. We both had the opportunity to win and control our own destiny for the 1 seed. That did not happen. We both lost. Yuki has pulled off 2 massive upsets in a row. We've actually got an interview with him coming up in just a couple of minutes. It's going to be a lot of fun. And now that's thrown a lot of things into flux. A lot of teams can finish in any spot. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, how do you feel after this week?
I'm bummed. I definitely would have liked to have won. Jake's obviously a very good team, so I'm not surprised that I lost. Unlike you, at the very least, the silver lining for me is I still control my own destiny for a bye. Whereas you need a little help, as well as you beating Erik, which is a very tall task for anyone in this league. So it's going to be interesting, but there are 7 teams in this league within 3 games of each other. There's still a lot of variations in the seeding that could happen. We do know that Erik has locked up the 1 seed, but all the other seeds are still up for grabs. There is still at least 1 team that's still in competition for the playoffs who will not make the playoffs. So, it's going to be a wild last week. And honestly, I know we're talking about this March to the playoffs right now, but last week really felt like a playoff week between how close some of these matchups were, but also the quality of the matchups. I think 3 of the 6 matchups involved 2 top 7 teams. The intensity is there. This is one of the most fun times of the Dynasty baseball year. Not that no time of the Dynasty baseball year is not fun. I love every single part of it. But
the long week was not fun.
The long week was not as much fun for you. No, the long week was fantastic for me. That one saved me. You know what? I wonder how different things would look if the long week was a normal week, because you would have beaten me. You control your destiny for a bye.
Yeah, no, not a lot would have had to change in general for me to have locked up number 1 at this point. It's crazy how tight everything is. And even though I'm number 3, only a couple of small things flip, and maybe luck will be on my side week 20 and in the playoffs, who knows? But yeah, no, not a lot would have had to go my way for that to happen. But you can say that about a lot of teams, I guess. It's been tight.
Yeah, there have been a lot of matchups. I mean, look at my matchup with Conor the week before. It literally came down to 1 strikeout. This is funny. So I was looking into this. I talked about on last week's episode, the bonus episode, how the Turner Seawall deal made a huge difference it can make a huge difference for me down the stretch. Well, it already has, but not because of Trey Turner. Because Paul Seawall got a strikeout, and that strikeout tied us in strikeouts. So instead of tying Conor, I beat Conor. So,
and that always seems to happen for you.
Always seems to happen, but it's interesting. The larger point I'm trying to make, other than bragging about my team, which we all know I love to do, is things are so close right now, and you never know what little thing is gonna go into just completely turn things around or change things. And boy, this is going to be a lot of fun. But there is a lot going on this week. We have a lot of matchups to break down. We will go through all the playoff scenarios towards the end of the episode, but let's why don't we get right into things here? And it's weird not having any trades to talk about in the opening segment. So let's just dump it over to Yuki, our interview with Yuki, and hang tight. We'll be right back.
We'll be right back. are back now with a very special guest. We have Yuki on, fresh off of 2 upsets in a row, upsetting Erik and then upsetting me in back-to-back weeks. How are you doing, Yuki? Thank you for taking time out of your busy move-in.
No worries. I'm doing great. How about you guys?
Doing pretty good.
Pretty good.
Can't complain.
Yeah. So yeah, let's dive right in here. You famously we were projecting you to be a bottom 2 team going into this year. That did not happen. You not only in our first roto were a surprising 5th. You have won 8 out of your last 9. You have locked up a playoff spot. At what point in the season did you start to think, hey, maybe I can make a run here? Maybe I can be one of the top teams?
Well, I mean, at the beginning of the season, I had a lot of confidence, but I mean, as like the season went on, that confidence grew, I guess, with more games played. But really, it's been, I don't know, that 8-1 stretch has really boosted my confidence. There were like games where I was like, OBPing like, I don't know, under 300, and I'm like, oh man, we're probably gonna like barely squeeze by. And then, with all the roto that Cam was like showing in the chat, I was pretty confident we're gonna be, fine somewhere in the maybe, just barely squeezing by or just barely missing it, where I kind of saw myself, I guess, realistically going into the season. But seeing now that I'm, I guess, in 5th and 2 games out of 1st, that's incredible. I mean, I think I'm very proud of this roster. I'm very happy with the work that I've done, and especially picking up like free agents and stuff. Has been like huge part of this team.
Yeah, absolutely. Any specific free agents that you want to mention, having being big parts of your team this year?
Oh, there are a couple. Miles Michaelis and Johnny Cueto I've basically picked off in free agency, and they're probably my 2 best starters right now, which is really cool, but at the same time really says something. But aside from that, I know Cam, you recently, like not long ago, dropped Nico Horner, and I took a chance, and he has been fantastic in terms of getting on base and stealing bases.
He's been good.
Yeah, God, yeah. Johnny Cueto's been great lately too. Is there? I know you've talked about the pitchers, just kind of picking up pitchers that you've hit on. Have you had any specific strategy for this year? Anything specific you've been trying to do, or just kind of winging it and getting good results?
I was kind of really interested in what the EBO did last year with the relief pitcher strategy, and I wanted to like experiment here and there by having basically a roster, as many pitchers as I can, with some starters obviously, so I can get innings pitch worked out. And yeah, that's kind of been my strategy. So currently I have 7 relievers. That's kind of that's 7 relievers and only like a handful of starters. And I just try to have that ratio of like having more relievers than starters. I feel like I can really try to dominate the relieving game.
No, it's interesting to me because like EBO last year had a lot of relievers but not a lot of starters. It almost seems like you're doing a slightly modified version of that where you put a little more emphasis on having starting pitching, and boy, I mean, it's working for you.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like what I've been trying to do. Obviously I'm trying to, get more quality relievers. I'm working with phenomenal guys like Scott Barlow, Kenley Jansen, Doval. They're all great. And, I traded for Fire Eisen. Too bad he's hurt. But anyways, but yeah, I mean, having a lot of relievers has helped. It doesn't really help when, they kind of have a meltdown. They kind of blow your ERA. But it really helps to have guys like Michaelis and Cueto who can really, or even Quantrill who goes deep and just kind of keeps it at bay and somehow win ERA and WHIP. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Quantrill's another guy who's been awesome. But yeah, looking ahead now, you could finish as high as the 3 or as low as the 6 But you are going to make the playoffs 2 out of 3 years, which is more than most teams can say, which is more than most likely Ruthvik will be able to say, more than as much as Conor will be able to say, as much as Erik will be able to say. So that's kind of roundabout way of saying very few teams have had as much success in the past 3 years of you as you have. But looking forward to the playoffs, are there any key players you have in mind for the playoffs, or any matchups you're looking forward to, or any specific person you want to play in the playoffs?
Not really. I mean, playoffs are scary. I think the one time I went was in 2020, and I steadily got beat. I think it was by you, Cam.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So it's always a different beast, but I'm just trying to, like, just praying that my players stay hot. Really is kind of like what I've been relying on in terms of hitting. Just praying that my hitters can keep this OBP, the high runs and the stolen base OBP numbers going. Obviously, I have star players like Harper and Riley, but I'm very dependent on a lot of these role players like Conor or Varsho, Rosarena, Swanson, and these guys being good for the long stretch is like really a key for me. And just hoping this pitching thing still works. It's worked for me for the entire year. Hopefully, it can keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we hadn't even mentioned your bats, but yeah, Riley, of course, is putting up near MVP numbers, and Dansby Swanson's been huge for your team as
And
well.
Bryce Harper is coming back too, or he
That's
is
true.
back. Yeah.
Yeah. And as we've seen, I mean, anything can happen in the playoffs, and you've just beaten 2 of the top 3 current seeds back to back. So who knows? But yeah, I guess let's look forward a little bit. How do you view your team going forward after the season over the next few years? I know you've definitely got a lot of picks to look forward to and some prospects coming up. You've also got most notably Corbin Carroll, who's been in the majors a little bit. How do you view your team and your competitive window going forward?
I think my competitive window's still open, but I can, do a lot more work in trying to like have a good pipeline. That means like, really bringing more depth and, quality guys into the minor league system. I'm just, trying to collect as many young guys. I have a lot of great players that I think I could I guess like part ways with, because I have a lot of younger players, especially on the IL, like Stevenson, Kirilloff, or notably on the IL too. And then you have guys like Carroll, Gabriel Moreno, and whatnots on my prospect roster. And I mean, they look great, so I would love to have them on the roster. It's just, I think I could use a lot more picks and prospects. I feel like my minor league team has been kind of, steadily declining. I haven't put too much emphasis. I tried to, but that's the kind of work I'm going to be doing, especially in the next couple of years.
Well, speaking of your minor league team too, I don't even think we mentioned Corbin Carroll came up yesterday. That's a huge addition to your major league team here. You think he's going to be up for you for the playoff run?
Ooh, I don't know. With enough injuries, he might force his way in.
Oh man, yeah. I didn't I think he debuted yesterday. We're recording this on Tuesday. I don't know how he did, but he went 1 for 5. Okay, he scored a couple of runs. So hey, he might, just with the way he plays too, he might force his way onto your roster. God, he's gonna be so good. He is nuts. But yeah, I think things are looking up for you. Absolutely. I have to say, I'm eating crow. At the beginning of the year, I wasn't a believer, but you have I was telling, I forgot if I told Cam off air, if I told him yesterday, kind of on the recording, but like at first glance, like when I looked at your team, I was like, there's some big names here, but I was like, it was kind of lacking. I felt like in some of the depth names, but then I kind of looked around and I was like, you know what, this is a team that has a lot of really solid pieces that just fit very well together. And it seems like this has really worked out for you. So, kudos to you. This
Yeah,
This is
thank
not
you.
a team I want to face in the playoffs. Your team is not. There's no team I want to face in the playoffs, but the way you've been playing, especially, you're coming into the playoffs on a hot streak, and it terrifies me.
And yeah, I mean, one thing I'll add is that like in the trade deadline, I only made two moves. Didn't really make too big of moves, but I remember trading David Robertson to Cam for a pick, and I traded Tyler Freeman for Seiya Suzuki, which I thought were really good because I was able to convert one of my prospects into, I guess, like a win now, or even like a win now. Even Suzuki's still like a long term piece, but like something that would help with my depth in the outfield, which I seem to have a lot of, but you can never have enough. And really helps that he's, been a high OBP, high runs guy, so that has really helped out. And Robertson, that I was able to convert for a pick, very happy. I think, I have a lot of relievers, but it's good to like deal from depth, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no,
I think both Cam and I were surprised that Suzuki was available for the price that you got him for. I thought that was one of the better deals at the trade deadline. Definitely think he got better.
yeah, and as for Robertson, you traded me one of your top couple closers, and you still outsaved me by 4. So definitely, yeah, dealing from depth to build for the future is always good.
Mm-hmm. And knock on wood, but I've done really well in the second round, seemingly. I've hit on Carroll. I think hopefully I can hit on Hassel, and who knows? I have other guys like Triantos in the recent draft. So yeah, just I guess hoping that those guys work out, but I really have good luck in the second round, and I was happy that I was able to farm for that price. So.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Anything else you want to add, Cam?
No, that's about it. The odds are we've looked through this, and it's kind of overwhelmingly likely that we'll have a rematch as the 4v5 one way or the other. So yeah, hopefully, for my sake, it turns out better for me than it did last week. But yeah, no, thank you so much for coming on, Yuki. Any last words before we go?
Well, good luck in the playoffs, you guys. I mean, I'm pretty. You guys are all playoff teams. It's gonna be scary facing you guys, so looking forward to it.
Looking forward to potentially facing you too. It's gonna be a lot of fun, no matter how things shake out.
May your winning streak, may it never end. And may the sign of the Southern Cross be some comfort to you when you're low. And may the devil's evil eye pass you by.
All right, we are back now. Thank you to Yuki for coming on. It was a great interview. I guess we haven't recorded the interview yet, so we don't know if it was great, but we can assume that it was.
It's always great having Yuki on.
It is, and if it wasn't a great interview, then you can tell us, listener.
Yeah, you can tell us.
But let's get into the matchups, and what better place to start than with Yuki's matchup against me. The big upset, which was the reason we brought him on the show in the first place. He beat me 7-5. Just all around good week for Yuki. He scored 54 runs, had a 372 on base, 49 RBI. Power numbers were low on both ends, and his pitching wasn't incredible outside of the saves. But he did enough to win. He won all 6 hitting categories. He was trailing doubles and homers and on base percentage for much of the week. It really just kind of, I know I said this to you, Sahil, but this is what every Yuki matchup is. It's you're winning comfortably for the first 6 days, and then suddenly it's 3:00 on Sunday, and you look up and suddenly it's tied, and you don't know how that happened. And Yuki was able to hold on to the victory. He got 2 big home runs from Isaac Paredes. He had a whole bunch of doubles Thursday, whole bunch of doubles Saturday and Sunday. He had a 443 on base Saturday and a .06 on base Sunday. Just an insane weekend from Yuki to pull off the victory. I didn't play bad. I wouldn't say it certainly wasn't a great week, but I still had 40 runs, 17 doubles, a good on base. My pitching was great for 5.5 days before kind of blowing up over the weekend. But really what happened, I guess you can kind of sum it up. Yuki had a great weekend and I didn't, and that put him over the top.
Yeah, I feel like it's often the story of your matchups. I think you posted the stat in Slack today where it's like you'd be 16-3 if every matchup ended after Saturday, right? I think the stat was.
I've had so many matchups where I'm winning the whole week and blow it on the last day, and only one matchup, that was my second matchup against Ruthvik, where I was losing the whole week and pulled out a tie. It might have been my first matchup with him, but either way, that's the only scenario where it's flipped. It kind of feels like because I'm second in Roto and there's a decent gap between me and third. It kind of feels like the team that's got a great run differential but is kind of middle of the pack.
Right. You've definitely had some unlucky games this year. What I will say about this week is, Yuki did not do great with the pitching rate stats, but you also didn't have great kind of run producing numbers. The home runs and ribbies were low. I don't think either of you played particularly bad this week, and you probably had above average weeks, but it's just the way the categories worked out for you. Definitely a tough loss for you to swallow. We mentioned this earlier, with Erik and Jake losing last week in upset losses. There was definitely a huge opportunity for both you and me to gain some more ground this week. We unfortunately were not able to do that. And now you go from, really having a chance to, get the bye, or at least controlling your own destiny for it. You still very much could get a bye, or maybe even playing for the 1 seed. I mean, because I lost, if you had won, in fact, you and Erik could be playing for the 1 seed this week, I believe.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's a huge loss for you, but you still, have the opportunity to get a bye and be a very good seed. And it's not a far-fetched scenario that it happens. So it's a bummer, but you're still in good shape. The big winner here is obviously Yuki. Yuki 8-1 in his last 9. He's now coming off back-to-back wins over you and Erik. I mean, who would have seen that coming?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I know we talked a ton about his team in the interview, but yeah, presumably. I know we're just assuming, but I imagine these are going to be the first things we say when we bring him on tomorrow. But yeah, no, great week from a lot of guys. Great week from Randy, who hit 5 doubles and had a 516 on base. Great week from Dalton Varsho. Great week from Seiya Suzuki, who is now on Yuki's Major League roster. But the matchup MVP has to go to the guy who flipped the matchup. That's Isaac Paredes. 4 homers, including 2 on the final day. Scored 6 runs, drove in 6 runs, which both proved to be important. I think this is especially contextually, this is a clear winner for matchup MVP. Not a whole lot more to say. I will shout out another great week for Aaron Judge on my end, and Jonathan India played well as well.
No, for sure. And what I will say a little more just about Yuki's chances now, like obviously, like I mentioned, 8-1 in the last 9, but he's pretty close now to locking up a playoff spot. And not only that, it's not like he's sneaking in as the 6th seed. I think it's more likely than not he's going to be the 5 seed, maybe even the 4 seed. So good for Yuki. I don't think any of us saw this coming. I have to eat crow on my Yuki prediction. Let's see my official. I believe I made one in the off season. And I forget what the exact number of team I put him on. It was under hot takes.
Well, I know he called you out in the chat and said that you had said he would be a bottom 1 team.
In 2020, I said he would finish with one of the worst 2 records in the league, and I was correct about that prediction. This year, my bottom 2 team prediction was that Ruthvik would be a bottom 2 team, which is not the case.
Oof.
Maybe I guess I did make another Yuki prediction that I'm just not aware of, but I guess I did. So, but kudos to Yuki. I was wrong about your team. I think a lot of us were wrong. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I don't think you saw this coming. So
yeah, no, and he has the tiebreaker over Ruthvik, so he's guaranteed a playoff spot. That's not in doubt.
yes, yeah. You're exactly right. I wasn't 100% sure if he did, but yeah, he does have the tiebreaker over Ruthvik, which means that even if Ruthvik beats me this week and Yuki loses to EBO, Yuki will still make the playoffs because he owns the tiebreaker over Ruthvik.
Yeah, he can be as high as. Does he have the tiebreaker over you?
No.
Okay, so he can be the 3 seed.
You know, I put this. I calculated this out on my flight yesterday. I was delayed coming back from Chicago, and I like wrote it out on my iPad. Yuki could be as high as the 3 seed, and as low as the 6 seed.
Could you imagine Yuki is the 3 seed?
I literally cannot. To be clear, I don't think it's the likely scenario, and we'll run through what we think are the more likely scenarios kind of at the end of the episode. I don't think him being the 3 is super likely, but like I just wow.
Yeah.
I have no other words for it. And you look at the team and you're just like, I still look at the players and I'm like, how? But it almost kind of reminds me of Erik's team, some of Erik's teams in the past, in a sense that like you look at the team and you're not like overwhelmed by it, but you look at how the pieces fit together and you're like, okay, this makes more sense.
Yeah, and we'll see if that's something that can be repeated year after year. But absolutely, it's working right now. But yeah, let's move on now to the next matchup, and let's talk about your matchup, the other big upset of the week. You, not a big upset necessarily. You were beaten by Jake 7-3-2. Another all-around spectacular week for Jake. Really across all the categories except for maybe home runs, but it wasn't. Outside of 1 or 2 teams, no one hit a lot of home runs, so I'm not going to hold that against him. But he was great in the pitching categories, great in the hitting categories, and his on base was 404. This was the 7th highest of all time and one of the very few 400 on base percentages we've ever seen, and it was enough to beat you.
Yeah, and it's not like I'm one of the reasons I'm not as upset about this is because like my team also played lights out. It just wasn't as good enough to beat Jake. Like I would have beat, I think, almost every other team, at least every other playoff team this week. And sometimes it just goes like that. I think it'd be more concerned if my team just started shitting the bed here, but it really didn't. Kudos to Jake. Jake's team was fantastic. I thought he did a great job of managing his roster this week. He had 5 home runs like early in the week, like the first 6 days, and then he hit 7 yesterday. His team just went off. And it's interesting because his offense hadn't been doing as well before this week. And I remember him making a comment at the beginning of the week where he's just like, well, my team's been super streaky. Let's see what version shows up. And the version that showed up was the one that's just a world beater. And this is why, I think Jake has the upside to win the league here. I think it's a question of can his team consistently put it together for multiple weeks on both the offensive and the pitching side. It did this week, but I'm curious to see what it does moving forward. And another great performance by his team this week. So he's now a half game behind me in the standings. Great week for him.
Yeah, great week for him. Absolutely solid all around. Blake Snell was the only person on his team who didn't play well, but he got another great week from Sandy. Frankie Montes finally made a good start. Carlos Rodon, another good start. Matchup MVP though, with respect to JT Realmuto, who had a phenomenal week with his 8 RBI, I got to give it to the guy who posted a 600 on base percentage over the full week. That's Michael Harris, the second. 10 for 20 with 4 walks. Scored 6 times, also hit 4 doubles. Just a remarkable week. And that carried that on base percentage up to 404, which again, near record, and those 4 doubles were very needed in that tight category. The 6 runs, really those. He scored 6 runs. He beat you by 6 runs. He's hit 4 doubles. He beat you by 3 doubles. He hit 1 home run. He beat you by 1 home run. It's just right in those 3 categories, or I guess he tied you in home runs, but right there in those 3 categories, plus on base percentage, Michael Harris flipped his matchup.
He got an absolute stud of Michael Harris. That was good on Jake for I think he was a free agent pickup. However, he got Michael Harris. I mean, good for him. Michael Harris is looks like he's going to be fantastic moving forward. But yeah, I think that's a great choice for MVP. Yeah, just a bummer for me, but it's just how it goes sometimes.
It is. You certainly played well.
Oh yeah, I certainly played well. I'm not. My team's been playing very well the second half of the season. I've been very encouraged to see that keep up. I mean, interestingly, now I'm 7-2 in my last 9, and Jake was both of those losses. So maybe he's just my kryptonite. Him and Erik. Speaking of bummers, let's talk about this Conor v. Ruthvik matchup. Ruthvik lost a very tight, very rough matchup to Conor that was flipping back and forth pretty much all day on Sunday. Ruthvik didn't have enough offensive firepower here. 12 home runs, 37 ribbies, soundly beat Conor's 5 home runs and 30 ribbies, but he lost the rest of the offensive categories. He was able to win saves, and barely by like the teeth of his skin won ERA and whip.
By the teeth of his skin.
The skin of his teeth, isn't that the saying? Oops. The teeth of his skin, I'm gonna stand by it. That sounds more fun than skin of his teeth. Because I guess teeth have skin now. But I think my favorite stat from this matchup is that for the second consecutive week, Conor was involved in a matchup where strikeouts was either tied or was only won by 1. And this week, Conor came ahead on the strikeout train 82-81. And that's a big reason why he won instead of just tying or losing to Ruthvik. So we alluded to this a little earlier when we were talking about Yuki, but this most likely means that Conor has clinched a playoff spot. Unlike Yuki, he has not officially clinched a playoff spot. It looks like a 2-team race right now between Conor and Ruthvik for the last playoff spot. But this definitely puts him in the driver's seat right now to clinch a playoff spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And this matchup was a ton of fun just for all 6 pitching categories being insanely close. 1 strikeout was the difference, 1 quality start, 2 saves, 1 hold, 0.2 of ERA and 0.02 of whip. All 6 of these categories were insanely close. I've never seen anything like it. But the difference was Conor's bats were average and Ruthvik's bats were below average. That's really all there was to it. Conor got good hitting performances from Sal Perez, as well as Rhys Hoskins, but really Goldschmidt, of course, too. But really, of course, it goes down to the pitching. A few guys I could pick. Justin Verlander had 16 Ks in 9 innings. But I got to go with the guy with 2 quality starts. That's Robbie Ray. 13 2/3 innings, 14 Ks, 0.66 ERA, 0.51 whip for matchup MVP. He was just remarkable. Interestingly enough, had Ruthvik won the matchup, you could say that it was Josh Hader who won the matchup for him. Hader, of course, is on Conor's team, he gave up 6 earned runs, 7 hits, 2 walks in just 1 1/3 innings. He just terrible week for him. He gave up the most earned runs and the most hits of any pitcher on his team, despite being a reliever. So yeah, rough week for Hader. If it was Ruthvik who had pulled out the win, I'd probably have given matchup MVP to, I don't know, let's go Shane Bieber. But yeah, no, it was Conor. And it's Robbie Ray.
Yeah, there you go. Robbie Ray. Going from Ruthvik to Conor and last year.
Yeah, Connor's big acquisition last year.
That was, or no, he went from uh Alex to Connor. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
thinking of Sal Perez, but Robbie Ray was critical for Connor down the stretch last year, and he's now critical for him down the stretch again after struggling a little bit to begin the year. So good for him. But got some breaking news while we're recording. A Chucky Robinson 2-run home run.
Hey, Chucky Robinson.
Chucky
When does Yuki add him to make him the next catcher?
I mean, like tonight, right? Like I'm sure Yuki has some like catcher senses, or like he has an alert anytime a catcher hits a home run or something. And it instantly pulls up on his phone. He's like, all right, I gotta add him.
If he never added Mark Kolasvari, then maybe he won't add Chucky Robinson. But God, these catchers.
These catchers, man.
All right, 3 matchups left. Let's talk about the closest remaining one. That was Andrew versus the Bellies, a 7-4-1 win for Andrew.
Yeah, this is a week that I think kind of got slept on a little bit for Andrew because he's not in the playoff hunt, but 17 home runs and 48 ribbies, 7 steals, 6 quality starts, 79 Ks. It was pretty solid week. I'm honestly kind of surprised the Bellies kept it as close as they did. I mean, they were really helped out by having a 2.18 ERA and a 1.10 WHIP to 3 holds. And here's an interesting stat for the Bellies. The Bellies finally got another save.
Oh, their second of the year.
Their second save of the year, I believe. Yes, I think you're right. No, it's their third.
Oh, their third of the year. Okay.
Third of the year.
Loizaga got one.
He did. That's right. They're for context, the team with the second fewest saves is Erik with 23 saves.
All they need now that they have 3, they need 6 saves in the final week of the season to tie last year's Erik for fewest saves in a season.
God damn. They also need 123 saves this week, or 123 more saves than Yuki this week to finish with more saves than Yuki in the regular season. Do we think that's?
I think they can do it. I think well, the Yankees do play 124 games this week, so if Loizaga can get saves in 123 of them.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, it's no big deal. It's kind of a commonplace thing. It can happen.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But yeah, no, weird. Very exciting. I was not on that beat, so I'm glad you're paying attention to that.
Of course, yeah. We here at the pitcher to hitter pay attention to all things, the big stats, the little stats. We care about everything here.
Yeah, as far as big stats go, the Bellies continue their reign as champions of the losers belt. While Yuki took the winner's belt, the Bellies hold on to the losers belt for the continued record 9th straight week. They scored 15 runs and hit 3 homers. That's bad. That's really, really bad. What's the fewest? Hold on. Is that a record for fewest runs scored in a week? Let me check this live on air.
I hold the record in a playoff matchup for the fewest.
It is the record.
Oh.
You're no longer on the hook. Well, I typed this up. Do you want to tell the chat this?
Yeah. So the Bellies. Oh man. So hold on. I need to pull the number back up. What? Well,
15. Wow. 15 runs in a week. That's absurd.
oh my God. How is that even possible?
I don't know. They weren't really setting lineups. No one scored more than 3 for them. Mark Canna scored 3. He had a good week. Yeah. Let's talk about the team that won, though, because we haven't yet. Andrew did win. He hit 17 homers, which in a week like this where no one was hitting homers is a great number.
It's a great number regardless.
Yeah, it's a pretty good number regardless. MVP's got to go to Nate Lowe, who hit 4 of those homers and drove in 11 of Andrew's 48 runs. scored 6 of his own. Just a remarkable week. 407 on base for Lowe.
He was the AL Player of the Week this week.
Yeah, well earned.
Yeah, well earned. No, he was great.
Yeah.
No, good week for Andrew for sure. God, as I was thinking about this, so the Belly scored 15 runs. We now have 14 players you could start in the lineup. That means that their players just collectively in your lineup needed to average slightly more than 1 run the entire week.
That's true. Yeah, we had 1 fewer slot in our lineups when you had 16 runs in the finals.
Right. I played that week super injured too. I don't even know if I had any full lineups. That was back when, so remember in 2019 was the last year where they did 40-man rosters. Like you could get the full 40-man up. So they had no incentive to actually put players on the IL. Teams didn't. So like I was rostering Christian Yelich that year, like on my major league roster. And not in my
That's
IL,
right.
even though he had the hip injury, I think it was what fouled the ball off his knee, something like that. Oh,
Man.
easy.
Yeah.
But enough on shitting on the bellies. Let's talk about the other 2 matchups that are left. Let's do Alex and Zach v EBO. We don't usually put Erik at the end, but Erik deserves to be at the end this week because I said so. The Tendies beat EBO 8-1-3, and they've now doubled their win total over the past 2 weeks. I believe this is their first winning streak of the year. They're now 4-12-3 after beating beating Jake last week. They beat EBO this week. Not a particularly special week on the hitting side. They had a 249 OBP, which that had to have set some sort of record.
Second worst ever.
Okay. But they were actually pretty solid in the pitching categories, 59 Ks, 6 saves, 350 ERA, 110 whip. You know, they got the job done there, and it was enough to beat EBO. I don't know. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I guess my thoughts are the EBO won with a 263 OBP, which is like bottom 10 of all time, but it was the second worst in the matchup they're currently in. So it got them the win.
That has to be the lowest
OBP
that anybody has ever had and won that category.
Oh, it's got to be this, and it's got to be this by a mile.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's one that was in like the 200, like 270, 280 range from earlier this year with the squish ball, but still.
Yeah, no, for sure. And this is one where honestly 11 of 12 categories were very easily could have gone the other way. Anything except for saves could have gone to the other team. EBO was lost by 1 run, 1 double, 2 homers, 3 RBIs. The only category they won was on base percentage, and again, the worst winning on base percentage of all time. But they also tied 3 categories. Kind of a weird week. I can't believe Alex had 249 on base percentage and did enough in other hitting categories to win. I'm sure this team would have lost to most other teams, but it was just enough to win. And there certainly were a few decent enough performances on this team that carried them. It's not like every player on the team was bad. Emmanuel Clase had a good week out of the bullpen with 2 saves and a perfect ERA. As for matchup MVP, though, I will say Joe Adele had a very good week, unfortunately. But MVP, I want to give it to a few different people. I want to give it to honorable mention to Riley Green. I'm going to say it goes to Willy Adames, just because he had the extra doubles, the extra homer, the extra RBI. Both were terrific, though.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely nice to see the bellies, or sorry, not the bellies, the Tendies pick up another win. And we're talking a lot about the playoffs in this episode, but it is officially confirmed who the bottom 4 teams are going to be. So the lottery odds are set to some degree. The Bellies, EBO, Alex and Zach, and Anthony's pick are all lottery picks. Or sorry, not just that they are all lottery picks, but they are all 20% odd lottery picks. So for those of you who don't recall, the lottery is a 20, 10, 10. So the teams who finish with the 4 worst records, their picks have a 20% odds of being the top pick, and 5 and 6 have 10% odds. So the 4 teams I just mentioned have 20% odds. Their picks.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, that's definitely interesting. EBO owns 3 first rounders that are all projected to be lottery picks. Could you imagine if EBO gets the top 3 picks in the draft?
My God, that would be insane. I mean, what that's chalking Drew Jones, Jackson Holiday, and like Termar Johnson. That's nuts.
All 3 of them. God,
all one farm system that's already super stacked thanks to me trading them like half my farm.
Yeah, no, after draft day, EBO is going to have the top farm system in the league. That's a guarantee.
If they don't already have it, I think you could reasonably argue they do.
You could. Maybe we could do farm system rankings once the season's over, because I'd like to see where a lot of teams rank.
Yeah, I'd like to see how far I dropped after the Turner deal. I'm sure I'm not even in the top 8 anymore, if that.
I mean, I've dropped a long way too.
You have. You've lost kind of your top tier prospects. They've either been promoted or just traded. Oh,
yeah,
man.
I mean, this is the first. My top tier guys are gone. This is probably the first time in league history that I don't have a top 4 farm.
Are you all right with that?
It's weird, and I mean, I think I can build it back, but it's weird not having that, you know?
No, I feel that. It was weird for me having a very good or solid farm for a half second, and now I feel more comfortable having a bad farm again almost. But for you, it's got to be unsettling with it being that way because you're so used to having a good farm.
It is, yeah.
Well, let's not get too deep into our later episodes here. Let's get to the last matchup we have to talk about. And that is Erik beating Anthony. I have almost nothing to say about this other than this was not surprising at all. The result. Maybe I didn't expect it to be a 10-0-2 win, but Erik kind of did what he needed to do. The only thing I didn't like about his week was the 3-10 OBP, but like he even chipped in 2 saves to a team that doesn't usually rack up saves. So I mean, Erik, yeah, just another solid week for him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, 2 saves. Probably I don't believe he's gotten more than 1 save in a week all year. But he was just 1 save and 1 hold away from a 12-0 victory. Say had he kept Devin Williams, he would have gotten no, he wouldn't actually. Devin Williams did not get a save last week, so that wouldn't have made a difference.
No, he did on Sunday.
Oh, he did on Sunday. Yeah, I guess he did. That was Sunday, not today. So I guess, yeah, that would have made the difference, would have made it 11-0-1. But that in a matchup like this, it doesn't matter. The hitting was very good, except for the on-base percentage, like you said. Just a great all-around week. Not a whole lot more that you can say about this. I'm looking for a matchup MVP. There are a few pitchers I could go with. Adam Wainwright was good. Max Scherzer was good. But I don't know if I want to give it to a one quality starting pitcher, especially when there was a guy who had as good a week as Jose Ramirez did, with his 7 RBIs, 3 homers, 385 on base, being all near the top of his team. Tyler O'Neill as well drove in 9 runs, but had the on-base percentage was a fair bit worse. I don't know. I could give it to either of them, really. Let's give it to O'Neill, actually. I've changed my mind. Just the 9 RBI is a very high number. And I guess the on base percentage didn't end up mattering because he won the category anyway.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go.
The
Tyler.
long way to get to our pick or your matchup MVP, but we got there, and I'm proud of you.
And Tyler O'Neill being the pick means 2 weeks in a row with 6 first-time matchup MVPs.
Hey, I like it.
This week, Paredes, Harris, Ray, Lowe, Adames, and O'Neill.
Well, there you go. It's just how it goes. I like it.
Yeah. But that was week 19. Let's get into week 20. This is what we've all been waiting for, the final week of the regular season. It's here.
Yes, it is finally here. It is hard to believe. It's I was thinking back to this earlier, just like it felt like simultaneously such a long season, but also such a short season. And it's funny looking back and thinking like, wow, I owned this player this year. Like, because it was so long ago, like back in like April. It's just like, it's hard to believe. I own
I keep track of my editions. I owned Jack Sawinski for a day in June. I owned Tyler Kinley for 3 days in May. I owned Jace Peterson for a day in May. I streamed Michael Waka. I owned Nicky Lopez for 11 days in April. I'm sure you got a bunch of players like this too.
Oh man. I started the season with Kyle Hendricks, Kevin Biggio, and Miles Straw on my roster. Like, it's hard to believe now that those guys were at any point on my roster. Oh man, I'm sure there are some other good ones that I'm just not thinking of because I've not kept as close track as you have, but I would love to go back and see it. But there's still a week left of the regular season. As you know, we usually just give you the matchup of the week, discuss that a little bit, maybe talk about another matchup or two that's an honorable mention, and then just move on. This week, we're going to go through all of the matchups because there's a lot of playoff implications here. And then we're going to wrap up our kind of week 20 preview with a couple of interesting questions related to the week. So let's start with what would be the matchup of the week, or what is the matchup of the week, but what would usually be the only matchup that we talk about. I think it's pretty obvious. We all know it's obvious. Cam, take it away.
Yeah, so of course the obvious matchup to watch for this week, the one that's got the biggest implications, of course, the Crone Zone versus the Tendies.
Of course, naturally.
Of course, naturally. Andrew's 8-10-1. The Tendies are 4-12-3. The Battle of New York, if you want to call it that. I'm sure there's you can come up with a better New York themed name for it. You can call it the Subway Series. Let's call it the Subway Series.
The fucking New Yorker series.
The fucking New Yorkers. Yeah. Call it what you will. It's a big series. Yeah, Alex and Zach are down they've got a lock on that third spot from the bottom. I don't know how their tiebreaker works with EBO, but they're going to be one of the top seeds in the lottery. Andrew's guaranteed to finish 8th. A tremendous season for him. Both teams will be in the lottery this year. Alex and Zach do not own their own pick, and neither do Andrew. Both of these picks are owned by EBO. So I guess it doesn't matter in terms of picks. It's both teams just kind of playing for pride here.
Exactly, but there is nothing more important than playing for pride.
Absolutely.
But we might as well, talk about some matchups that aren't for pride, which automatically means they're not as important.
Of course, yeah. And let's start with, I guess, if we have to, let's start with me versus Erik.
If we have to.
I mean,
we're wasting valuable airtime on this, but go on.
Yeah, who could possibly be excited about this matchup? No, this is the matchup that me and Erik have been waiting for since, and I think, and a lot of teams have been waiting for ever since it was announced that we were doing rivalry week, last game of the season. Me and Eric both chose each other as our rivals. This is something we've kind of been building for. Back in 2019, me and Eric swapped our first rounders for the year 2022, kind of betting on ourselves to be the better team at the end of last season, all the way back in 2019. I guess I won the battle, but he won the war because I had the better regular season record, but he won the finals, thus making his pick the worst one to own. Either way, we both traded our picks long before that anyway. But yeah, and we met in a very close matchup earlier in the year where he had a big lead for most of the week, but I made a furious comeback on the final day that fell just short. That was our first matchup since the tight semis. Of course, we split the regular season series last year. If I win, I finish no lower than third. This very easily could have been the matchup for one. The storylines just would have been so good. The fantasy gods couldn't have allowed it to happen. That's okay. But either way, this is if I want any chance at a top 3 seed, this is a must win for me.
Yeah. It's kind of an interesting dynamic because Eric literally has nothing to play for other than pride, which is why this is the second matchup we talk about, because there's some half pride here. But yeah, Eric's locked into the 1 seed, win or loss. Nothing's going to change with that. It's a lot of desperation. I wouldn't call it desperation, but yeah, you really need this one. I think one thing that's going to be interesting is because Eric not only knows that he doesn't need to win this week, but also that he has next week off. I wonder how that will affect some of the decisions that he makes with respect to maybe, say, streaming, or maybe picking up somebody this week that he wants to stash for the semis matchup instead of picking up a player that he thinks is going to help beat you. I'm curious how that goes. Maybe that could help give you a slight edge, but I think Eric's going to be motivated to still play you hard no matter what. So yeah, I mean, this was always one I had circled on my calendar for you all when the schedule came out, and I'm not surprised that it's coming down to the wire here. It is only a shame that Eric has the 1 seed locked up and that you two are not playing with the 1 seed potentially on the line. So it's just how it goes. But I'm still looking forward to this one nonetheless.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Me too. Yeah, other matchups this week. To preview, let's go into yours versus Ruthvik, because that's the one that could cause the largest flips in the standings. Ruthvik, his only hope to make the playoffs is to upset you, and then hope for the Bellies to upset Conor. It's a tall task, but he's still in it. And then, of course, as for you, you could finish as high as 2 and as low as 4. So this is a big one for both of you.
Yeah, there's a lot of different scenarios here, but if we're looking at the 2 through 4 seats, kind of the TLDR is that I control my destiny. If I win, I will get the 2 seed. If I lose and Cam wins, Cam will get the 2 seed. If I lose and Cam loses and Jake wins, Jake will get the 2 seed. Cam and Jake can fall as far as 5. I cannot fall as far as I cannot fall to 5. I can only fall as far as 4. But it is certainly it is basically 3 teams here that are competing to potentially get the 2 seed. So I definitely need this win. I would love to be able to lock up a bye for a 4th straight year. It's very weird to me that this is going to be the first year since year 1 that I won't have the 1 seed, but I will take the 2 seed happily. That being said, playing Ruthvik is not, a walk in the park. It doesn't look particularly likely that he's going to be a playoff team, although, never say never. But he's still a tough out. He still is a very quality team with a lot of good pieces. So we'll see. I don't think this is a guaranteed win or anything like that. And crazier things have happened in this league. So I definitely need to bring my A game this week and beat him.
Absolutely. And let's talk next about the matchup that Ruthvik needs to go a certain way. That is Conor versus the Bellies. If Conor beats the worst team in the league, he's in the playoffs. If not, then things could get a little hairy for him. It's 10:15 Eastern time on Monday. Conor is losing. Neither team has had a starting pitcher go, so of course anything can happen. But it is a good first day for the Bellies at the very least. But yes, Conor needs a win here. The Bellies are just kind of playing out the season. They're 2-17. How many games in a row have they lost? They're not really setting lineups. They have lost. Whoa, boy! They have lost 13 in a row.
Yikes!
They started out 1-0 with a win over Anthony, then lost 5. Then they were 2-5, and now they are 2-17. So 12 in a row. But yeah, including 9 of which they've been the owners of the losers belts. So Conor just needs to get by that for a spot in the playoffs. And how high can he go in the playoffs?
Conor, the highest that Conor can get is the 5th seed.
Okay, so he could pass Yuki.
He could pass Yuki. Yes, that is correct. Let's talk about Yuki though. Since we're on the topic of him, the league's hottest team right now, the wonderkind of the league, if you would have it. Did I use that word right? I already know I messed up one.
I don't think so, but that's okay.
I don't know. Yeah, whatever. You all maybe get what I'm saying. Yeah, Yuki could get as high as the 3 seed, as I mentioned earlier, or as low as the 6 seed. Yuki plays EVO this week. Yuki seed is not, unlike some of the other teams we talked about, is not solely dependent on him. A lot of it's going to depend on how you do, how Jake does, etc. But with a win, he's going to guarantee that he will not be the last seed at a minimum. If you, me, and Jake all win, Yuki will be the 5th seed. Any combination of us losing after that, and I think in particular, actually, it's really just you and, because I'm a game above Yuki, but I have the tiebreaker over Yuki, so Yuki can't move ahead of me. But if either you or Jake loses, Yuki can move up from the 5 seed. Right. Given that you play Erik, it's definitely likely that he has a strong possibility of being able to move up to say 4. The only way he moves up to 3 is if both you and Jake lose.
Yeah, so that would certainly take a lot to happen, but you never know. And let's talk about Jake. The final matchup we haven't mentioned. Jake is facing Anthony in rivalry week. Jake is currently up 5-0 to 7 at 10:18 on Monday. Yeah, Jake can go as high as 2nd as well. He'd need a lot to go right, considering I have the tiebreaker over him, but he's got the tiebreaker over you. So
for him to get second, like you and I both need to lose.
Right.
Yeah, like, I mean, there's some ties. Like I think I could tie, and then he'd have the tiebreaker and get it over me. But like I didn't go through all the specific ties. But like this, it's functionally like you and I cannot win the matchup and have him get the bye. Is the TLDR.
Right. Exactly. So he needs a lot to happen for him, but he's still not in a bad position. And he's got a fairly easy matchup against Anthony, who Anthony, by the way, is currently in 9th. He is guaranteed 9th. He's guaranteed 9th, and he does own his own pick, so he could be picking first here.
Yeah, No, I mean, we stated Jake's probably going to beat Anthony, but we also said that about him playing Alex the week before. So, never say never. That could, that could have some wild implications if that happens. And but Jake could drop as low as the 5th seed. In that scenario, he could also be as high as 2nd. I think there's a decent shot he ends up as the 3 seed, which would only require him winning and you losing.
Yeah, that seems to be I don't know if I say that it's the most likely scenario, but probably, right?
Yeah, so here's how it's laid out. Let's assume if we're assuming a world where the team with the best record wins each of the matchups this week, which as we all know, does not always happen, but I think is a pretty safe assumption here, saying that one of the more likely scenarios is Erik beating you, me beating Ruthvik, Jake beating Anthony, Conor beating Daniel and Matt, Yuki beating EBO, and then 2 non-playoff teams who I'm blanking on, I didn't have written down, but their matchup is not relevant to the playoff hunt. In that case, Erik's the 1 seed, I'm the 2 seed, Jake's the 3 seed, Yuki's the 4 seed, you're the 5 seed,
Ooh.
Conor's the 6 seed, and Ruthvik is out of the playoffs at 7. I personally think it's one of the more likely scenarios. Now, if you beat Erik, then you would be 3, Jake would be 4, and Yuki would be 5. But yeah,
I gotta beat Erik. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think I think the most likely scenario is that you're either the 3rd seed or you're the 5th seed. Let's put it that way. The 3rd seed requires you to beat Erik with no real requirements about what else happens. The 5th seed just means that you've lost to Erik with Jake and Yuki winning in matchups that they're heavily favored in, which is also seems very realistic. So really, I mean, you could argue a number of different ways about this, but it seems like your matchup versus Erik is the one that's most likely to have some real implications on the seeding, with my matchup v Ruthvik as well. It's going to be a fun one for both of us. As we know, Erik has kind of been your kryptonite. Have you beaten Erik at all?
Yes, I beat him once in the regular season last year.
Okay, so Erik seems to be one of your kryptonites, so we shall see how this goes. But who would have thought that you could potentially beat a 5 seed?
Who knows? Yeah, who would have thought? Well, while still being 2nd in the roto.
Still being 2nd in a roto. Hey, we could be talking at this time next week, and you could have the bye. Like we just don't know. It is a wild set of scenarios here. It feels like a lot better than last year. I think last year there was drama over who would be 2 and 3, but there was some drama over who would be out of the playoffs between, I think it was Jake and a couple other teams.
Jake, Anthony, and EBO were all very tight at the end.
Yes. And Anthony and EBO ended up getting it. So hey, you never know.
You never know. But we've talked a lot about these matchups. Are we ready to pick them?
No, we do have one more segment that a couple questions I wanted to ask you before we do our pick 'em.
All right. What questions are these?
Yes. So you know how much I like to ask Cam questions on the podcast. It's I feel like one of our better segments.
Putting me on the spot.
Yeah, putting you on the spot is always fun. Except this week, I think I might have keyed you in a little bit. But there weren't a lot of questions I felt like I could ask until the playoffs actually start and we notice seeding. But there are 2 that I wanted to ask you. Do you want to start with the group of higher seeds or the group of lower seeds?
Let's start with the lower seeds.
All right. So in which case, question number 1, who has the most to lose by not getting one of the last playoff spots? Is it Conor or Ruthvik?
I am gonna go. It's tough. Neither team owns their pick, so neither team would benefit from being in the lottery. I am gonna go Ruthvik just because Conor already made his miracle finals run last year. He's tasted the playoffs. He's had his one shining moment. Ruthvik, if he misses, that's 2 years in a row now. After nearly making the finals, after nearly being a Ruthvik versus me finals in 2020, Ruthvik would have missed the playoffs twice in a row. He did make a big push. He didn't trade away a lot of prospects, and neither team is super prospect heavy. But he did make a push and despite us both very much liking what he did at the deadline, but losing 2 of 3 after the deadline, that would be a big blow.
Absolutely. I personally think you're right, but rather than just regurgitate your argument, I'm going to make the argument for Conor because I think there is a almost equally convincing argument for Conor. Conor did make his one miracle run, but we're now in year 5 of the league, and you all who have been here since the beginning recall the shitty roster that we gave to Conor from the get-go, and Conor really had to build up. Conor did a great job of doing it, but not making the playoffs this year after making it to the finals last year and then not really having a ton of trade pieces, you worry that he might have maxed out and kind of reached the tip of his potential last year with the finals run. And while he did have to run, and while that was great, you could argue it could be a little disappointing given the long buildup that it took to reach this point to really just have like one big unexpected run to the finals, and that being that. Whereas for Ruthvik, he's had multiple playoff appearances now, and while he inherited a team that was not really particularly good, he didn't have quite that long buildup that Conor did. Ruthvik made it to the playoffs in year 2, and I made it to the playoffs again in year 3. So while I might be a little more concerned about Ruthvik in the long term because he's missed in back-to-back years, I think Conor, you could argue, is a little more to lose. Yeah, but I still think at the end of the day, I think you're right. It's Ruthvik because of the missing back-to-back years. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that leads to my next question. Who needs to buy the most between the 3 teams that can still get a buy besides Erik? Is it me? Is it you? Or is it Jake?
Now that's a tough question, and I don't know how to answer it, because on one hand you could say that every team needs to buy the same amount, but I think I'm gonna go with the team that's last in the roto. I'm gonna go with Jake just because I think he's the worst of the 3 teams. So having that built-in advantage of being the second seed, avoiding that extra matchup, would maybe be the most beneficial to him. Not that certainly, obviously, it's a very good team, but I would argue that it's the worst of the 3 teams competing for that second bye. So just having that, having to avoid playing a first round matchup matters a little more to them.
Interesting. I think it's you, and I don't think it's even close. And here's why. I agree with everything that you're saying, that I think that Jake is the worst of our 3 teams. But you have a lot of injured players right now. And I have one IL guy who's out for the year, Michael Brantley, who I've already replaced. Jake has 7 IL guys right now, but some of them are like James Paxton and Aroldis Chapman and Tyler Beagle, who I don't think are, and Jorge Soler, who I don't think are all necessarily particularly relevant to his playoff push. Whereas you have like Clayton Kershaw sitting on your IL. You have Zach Wheeler sitting on your IL. I know Kershaw is supposed to come back this week, but it would be nice for you to not have to rely on him so much and say his second start back if you hypothetically had to play in the first round of the playoffs. And Zach Wheeler, if he is on the short end of the timeline like they think he would, I think you wouldn't get him back until the second round. And even if he does come back in the first round, whenever he's presumably fully stretched out and full 100% to go would be his second start, and that would be in the second round. So I think that you have a lot to gain by getting Kershaw and Wheeler off the IL, especially with like Shamanaya struggling. And, a couple of the other hits that you've gotten to your pitching depth recently, where I think that you would be a much stronger threat in the semis than in the first round. And not that you couldn't still potentially win in the first round, but I think you more than anyone else would be able to get closer to full strength with the week off.
I think that's a fair point. I would like to be healthier than I am, certainly.
Yes.
And especially I just had to cut 2 guys who were on my IL because I needed to clear the space.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just, it's not an ideal situation for you right now. I think you've been handling it pretty well, but a healthy version of your team is a very dangerous team. And not one I want to face anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the 2 questions I had. I may or may not be on next week, so I may or may not have questions for you, but either way, I'm sure you'll have plenty of talk about with the playoffs, but I thought these were some particularly relevant questions for this week. But without further ado, let's go to our weekly predictions. We both picked me to beat Jake last week. That was incorrect. I picked Conor to beat Ruthvik. You picked Ruthvik to beat Conor. You were wrong about that. I was right about that. We both picked you to beat Yuki last week, and we were both wrong about that. We both picked Andrew to beat Daniel and Matt, so we were both right about that. I picked Alex and Zach to beat EBO. You picked them to tie. I was correct about that. We both
rough
picked
week for me.
Yeah, rough week for you. We both picked Erik to beat Anthony. That is what ended up happening. So I went 4-2 on the week. And you went 2-3-1.
Yeah, I tried to make some predictions to kind of pass you in the standings, and that kind of backfired.
Yeah, I mean, some of these weren't like bad predictions. But like Ruthvik being Conor, like almost happened. Like EBO and Alex and Zach tying could have happened, but yeah, it's not wasn't your finest hour. So I am 67, 28, and 19. You are now 61 and 29 and 26 as you continue to squander the early season pick'em lead you got against me.
Ouch.
Without further ado, it is time for our week 20 picks. Are you ready for this? I finally remember which one of us goes first.
It's you.
Yeah, I know it's me. Let me type these up in the pitcher to hitter command center. A damn fine Google Doc if I've ever seen it. And
Absolutely.
Let's start with the easy matchup. So you versus Erik. No, that's not the easy matchup. I think Conor will beat Daniel and Matt. I don't think it'll be particularly close. I think I'm going to skip that one. I think Yuki and EBO. Damn, that one's kind of not easy too. I'm going to pick Andrew to beat Alex and Zach. I'm going to pick myself to beat Ruthvik. I think that's going to be a close one. But I do think my team's a bit better than Ruthvik's. He also doesn't get 2 starts from DeGrom or Musgrove or Bieber, his top 3 starters, whereas I have several or a couple 2-start weeks from some of my top tier guys. So I'm going to pick myself to win. UV Erik is tough. What I like about Erik is that although Corbin Burns did not pitch well today, I don't know if you've seen that while we were recording, but he got a Pablo Lopez quality start. But both of them are going to have 2 starts this week. Whereas I don't believe you had anybody starting today.
I did not.
No, you didn't. And you do have McClanahan and Framber tomorrow. I wonder if they're 2 start guys or how that's going to work. It doesn't look like as of now they're 2 start guys. And maybe that changes, but ESPN has them projected to pitch on Monday of next week.
Which would suck, but I mean, if I'm playing in the first round of the playoffs in the long term, that might be better.
Right. It's an either or. It'd be if they pitch this week and you won,
Right.
like great. If they pitch this week and you were going to lose anyway, like it didn't come down to the pitching categories, and then you have to play next week, it would suck. But I think because of those pitching matchups, I got to pick Erik. The other 2 are tough. I feel like I want to pick an upset somewhere, and I don't think it's going to be Anthony. I'm going to pick EBO to beat Yuki.
Ooh.
Yuki's beat Conor, or sorry, he's beat you and Erik in back-to-back weeks. And wouldn't it be? It would not be an M-SABR dynasty end of the season if some shenanigans didn't happen, and Yuki losing to EBO is just that type of shenanigan. So there you go.
Yeah, that's honestly, I could definitely see that happening. Just, weird thing like that happening. I am going to pick Yuki, though, to beat EBO. I am going to pick Conor to beat the Bellies. I'm going to pick Jake to beat Anthony. I'm going to pick Andrew to beat the Tendies. I am going to have a little wishful thinking here. I think it'd be kind of fun if you and Ruthvik tied, because I would throw a lot into flux, particularly on Jake's end. I think that'd be a very fun tie, and you'd have your 5th tie of the year. And I think I have to pick myself to beat Erik. I gotta do it. It's maybe a little bit wishful thinking, but I am ahead of him in the roto. Sure, I'm very injured, but my hitters are very good. Of course, he's breaking out his, as we speak, ridiculous run scoring pace that he often does at this part of the season. But yeah, I gotta pick myself.
So that would mean in your pick'em scenario, if it came true, Yumi and Jake would have identical records. I forgot what we said the 3-team tiebreaker was yesterday. Is that record?
So I think it would be 3-team tiebreaker would be games won against the other 2 teams. So I believe that would be Jake first. Jake is the 2 seed. You is the 3 and me is the 4. That would be wild, huh?
Yes. God, that would be insane. My scenario is a little less complicated. Erik would beat a 1, I'd beat a 2, Jake would beat a 3, you would beat a 4 because Yuki lost, so Yuki would beat a 5, and Conor would beat a 6. So that would be how things would go. And it's interesting because neither of us picked the scenario that I thought would be the most likely to happen, but I guess the only difference from what I picked in that is that Yuki would win, and that would I'm going to confuse all of us if I keep repeating different variations of seeding. So just go with me on that. But
you gotta get your upsets in somewhere.
Yeah, you do. I just. When was the last time that everybody won that we were expecting to win in a week? Like, I think I had a little stretch there where I was really hot. I had a 6-0 week and a 5-0-1 week in back-to-back weeks with a 5-1 week after that, right? But like, I wasn't necessarily just picking all the best teams to win. It's there's going to be some variation. The best case scenario never happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I believe that'll do it for us this week. My last episode in Baltimore for a while. It's oh man, after a long summer of studying here for the bar, I am jetting off to Charlotte this weekend. Depending on how my schedule looks like, and unfortunately it is looking this way, it looks like Cam will be on the podcast either alone or with a special guest. It does not look like I will be able to record until next Tuesday, but we think that would be too late given the playoff matchup. So we'll figure out how to give you a podcast next week, but no reason to worry because we will always give you a great podcast. That is the pitcher to hitter guarantee as a podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League.
That it is. And we will see you next week, M-SABR Dynasty League.
Yes. Best of luck to everyone competing for a playoff spot. And honestly, the team's not competing for a playoff spot because that would really just throw things into chaos. So best of luck to you all.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Porque ya no estoy aquí, morí el día en que te fuiste así de mí. No estoy, camino por las calles sin pensar, oigo sin escuchar, abrazo sin sentir, soy el único muerto que puede caminar. Porque ya no estoy aquí, morí el día en que te fuiste así de mí.
This podcast is good.